what's the possibility of getting there?
The only reserve tickets are,
As a whole.
the only reserve section is the Coca-Cola.
Oh yeah,
And then
man.
50 tickets that they're giving out for the pool.
You wanna.
They haven't figured out how they're giving those out.
What are they doing for, are they like, just using the pool?
No, you can be in the inside and then.
Oh.
So that's.
Well, no, they have, no, right here.
Oh,
Our
our
pool,
pool.
our pool, they'll have a team, they're gonna have screens, so you can watch it live, and then there's gonna be, there's a camera that goes.
Yeah.
You would go
But
here.
the idea that if I can go
Spider
to the
cam,
self-pay,
that's getting, there's
self-insured, large employers. So now I say, okay,
And
I'm
and
go to you, and I'll say this account, you can fund your account, but use this
And then they got a
system so your
drone.
employees
Oh,
can
really?
monitor your health.
I'm excited for everything.
And you're gonna get these rates based on that, and you can fund the HSA,
Don't
self-insured.
walk anywhere near the,
Yeah, I know,
like
it's
where the
not just.
pool is and the food court.
So
You
in
can
this
take
measurement,
over the whole
it
area.
flips around the whole insurance model, because I was at NH3, so I was like,
It's
you
crazy.
can't,
So
Yeah.
it's good for you, I know, we get a lot of money from that.
Yeah, it changes.
We don't get a lot of money from it, we're spending a lot of money.
Really? We don't get money, they don't?
They don't pay us, no.
They don't?
It's costing me money to get all this stuff put in.
Why wouldn't they, why wouldn't they?
It's a commercial, basically a commercial.
Exactly what G.
Hey, turn
The
it
G
on.
said.
What's up?
When they.
Okay, is this running? This is live, we got everything?
How much money?
Okay,
You
folks,
haven't given me
welcome
the-
back.
It's not gonna be
A lot of
cheap.
people have to come and go, I'm just wondering which one, Tom, you wanna go before these guys or after? What do you think fit? Which one do you think fit?
what's he got?
What are you gonna do?
I just know.
Okay, so how are we gonna do this? So, this is my
Consider being interested.
class, which I'm really proud of. We've got
Wait, you weren't proud, you
cybersecurity.
weren't proud of the other one? Okay.
The other one, they're different, they're completely
They were
different
different.
folks.
Not as
That-
good looking as this guy.
I don't know, we're not gonna get into that. But what I wanna do is, we're doing in this class, cybersecurity, we have CS students and business technology students. So what I'd like to do, I have two groups of speakers here, we're so conscious. I have Tom Packard, who is he's been Chief Technology Officer for a number of healthcare companies, including CareCloud, another company called OrthoSensor here in Florida, and he's been involved with a lot of basically thinking about infrastructure, the back end, security, and he's given here a small demonstration of some of password securities and looking at some of the threats to cybersecurity. And I have another group here that are called Life Wallet that are Florida, where's your offices even?
In West Kendall.
In West
You
Kendall,
head
so-
west and you run out of gas, we're right next to you.
Okay, so basically, and this is interesting, and they come from Apple, and they're developing healthcare solutions, basically thinking about it as part of your watch and basically doing it for large organizations for tracking. How am I doing? Are you
You're
gonna be
doing great.
hiring me soon?
I should
So basically, in terms of monitoring, basically, all your data in your healthcare, and also having it on a personal level. So I'm thinking, what I'd like to know from you guys, since we're in a technical, if you can talk about basically your development, how you're developing this system, how you're dealing with security, because you're dealing with health, health data, that's gonna be of an issue, and we can have some discussion, and then Tom can interject on some of the things that you're using in terms of thinking about health care security. So
Sure.
would you rather have Tom go first or you folks?
We have to leave by 5:30, so if we can
okay,
talk a little bit. and
So
then-
can you can you?
Tom probably knows a lot more than we know about all this
Okay,
stuff.
but I'm just saying, but if you can, do you wanna show your system?
We could.
Yeah, why don't we, so we didn't do it the last time, you can hook up your system and then talk about, you're the chief engineer, what is you wanna introduce yourself as
Yeah,
well?
my name is Kyle Curato.
He's the code wizard.
I'm the
Okay.
janitor at Life Wallet.
That's what he is.
Okay, so come over here and then we can set you up and if you can help them set up here.
Hold on, I gotta get
and basically talk about your job, talk about maybe, are you interested in, and then you can even talk about your company, and are you interested in any interns, you're interested, are you hiring, or?
I am, especially good-looking ones.
Okay.
Let me tell you, well, in the age of Harvey Weinstein, that's
Right,
what
right. I was just gonna say, you don't wanna be doing that, you know?
So,
There's
ugly,
Kevin
fat,
Spacey
whatever you
also.
bring it on.
Right.
While Kyle's setting up, I'll tell you guys, are you guys familiar with iPhones and Android devices, both? Do you know the difference in the security model? In terms of how they implement security of the data. So you have user data that's going back and forth to the cloud all the time. Are you familiar with how they implement the security model?
Not on a detailed level.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you a detail.
Okay.
On
Do
the,
you need a marker or anything, or no?
I have one here.
Okay.
So I'll tell you, I'm most familiar with the way Apple does it, we're familiar with the way Android does it as well. But I'll tell you a big difference, which I think is important for folks like yourself that are gonna dictate what happens in the future in security. So when I'm going to go into an iPhone and I'm gonna use my fingerprint, right? It's gonna read my fingerprint and it's gonna decide whether it's gonna allow me in or not. And in the new phone, which Kyle has there, I think it uses your face. I don't know if you guys have seen that. The way that Apple did the security model is really interesting, and I think it's something that everybody studying security should think about. Normally, the way you do those kinds of security systems is you say, okay, you take the fingerprint data, you encrypt it, you send it out, and there's a server somewhere that says, this is Norb, so let him in, right? And that allows you to have a whole bunch of fingerprints in the system and a whole bunch of accounts. And the same is true of the Face ID. So there's been Face ID in the system before, but the difference is that they were two-dimensional, not three-dimensional. The one on the new phone is three-dimensional, actually does a map, a three-dimensional map of your face. So what Apple did that's different is they put a chip inside the device that actually stores your fingerprint or your face map and tells the software, this is Norb or this isn't Norb. So the data, even though it may be encrypted, is never sent out. Therefore, it cannot be stolen. And also, even if you put software inside the device, the data is not in software. It's inside a chip in hardware. And so that's a wonderful approach. They're doing the same thing now in the new phone, which is expensive. One of the reasons it's so expensive is, of course, the OLED screen, the Face ID. But as they put a chip that I think is 600 billion operations per second for machine learning. And they did that to be able, I don't know if you know it, but if you're looking at the phone and a text comes in, if you're not looking at it, it doesn't show the context of the phone, of the text. But if you're looking at it, it'll show you the text, right? So all the time, and as you guys probably know since you're CS students, that's a huge amount of computational power that you have to be taking the face in 3 dimensions, in different angles, as it's moving, and it's doing that all the time, and determining whether to let you in or not. And all that is in that chip inside there, so that they don't have to send it out and get permissions on it. So that's an approach that we should all think about, because today we have a lot of things going to artificial intelligence and machine learning, but the way we're gonna implement that is we're gonna be getting data from all of you all the time. But if we have to be sending that data out to get analyzed, then we're exposing all that data all the time, even if it's encrypted, right? If you can do it inside the device, it's a different design approach, right? Because of course the devices are gonna cost more if you have to put all those chips in. But it was something that I wanted to tell you guys to burn time while he was ready.
Okay.
So we don't have the actual, an HDMI adapter, but, I'll talk through it. Since you guys are security based, I'm gonna tell you a story. I used to work at Apple. I was there for 5 years. I worked in the R&D division. So I worked on the Apple TV, the Apple Watch, iTunes, App Stores, all that stuff. I was part of that team. But in iTunes, they have a crypto team, cryptographers. And this team is a group that the rooms are always dark, and then you never see them. And one time I went and asked the manager, hey, where's your team? And he goes, crypto guys are the hardest people to find, right? Because if you're...
They're all really weird too, so they're really, really
because
weird.
these are the hackers. And so they don't have a LinkedIn profile. They don't have they're not out there. So the hardest people, but these guys get paid to break DRM encryption, which is like, the stuff for audio and DRM encryption. So if you guys are getting into cryptography, just know that your group is going to be non-social. Right? We're kind of weird at just to start. So let me give you a little bit information about LifeWallet. LifeWallet is an ecosystem for your health, really. It does monitoring for your loved ones. It does monitoring for patients, for readmissions, and you guys know this, but having the phone in your pocket, information is always being collected on you. Your steps, which equal activity, which equal calories burned, and that information is always being, we kind of aggregate that with your permission. Everything is geared for us, consumer, is the center of our ecosystem. So you give the permission, you allow what you want to share, what you don't want to share to anybody, and then we grab that information in the background and we send it to the person monitoring. And that could be a care team, it could be somebody in the Keys, it could be somebody in New York. It can be anywhere that's monitoring you to improve your health. So that's kind of the high level. I mean, there's a lot of more specifics, but we do a lot of analyzing of the data. For example, I have an Apple Watch, and it does about 10 to 15,000 heart readings a day. So we're gathering that information all the time. And what we allow our physicians and our monitoring team to do, or coaches, is to sort of set up a sophisticated alerting system. And this alerting system allows you to say, all right, listen, if your heart rate gets above, let's say 175, then alert this entire team. Hey, Kyle's heart rate's above 175. If you're diabetic and it gets below 60, maybe you just want to alert the consumer, say, hey, you know what, I bet you're low, take an orange juice. So that's a whole layer. And when you think about infrastructure, we started with a very simple concept, which is let's gather data. So we're gathering data, and then we built on top of that. And I think if you guys go into AI, I think there's a lot of hype around AI in terms of, they think it's blown out of proportion. People say they do AI, it's probably not really AI, it's probably rules based. If this, then this, if this, then this, and they call it AI.
Well, they get more funding.
Exactly. So our whole system is AI. So, but I think when you think of AI, think of something very simple. Apple's done a great job at this because they're starting to do it with heart rates, where you're aggregating enough information. They waited 3 years to get 3 years of data, right? And think about how many phones are out there, and think about how much heart rate is being collected. And then they decided, okay, we have this data, let's analyze it. And just that simple concept, they're just alerting the consumer. They're not diagnosing you, they're just alerting you. That says, hey, you know what? There's an abnormality.
They actually have saved a few lives already. People that have gotten a notification on their watch that have said, you should go to the doctor. And people with arrhythmia, AFib, those kinds of things.
So I think when you guys think of AI, I think that's one of the things you should focus on. Solve a simple problem.
So you're dealing with Apple products, I guess, to begin with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're gathering that data with permission, or how are you gathering?
Yeah, so I'll take you.
We have all kinds of devices, not just Apple.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll walk you through a scenario.
Yeah, so walk me through a scenario.
We got selected by GE to monitor pre-diabetics. So what happened is Baptist identified 50, 70, or 100 pre-diabetics and said, hey, listen, we want to monitor this to prevent them from becoming pre-diabetic to diabetic, right? Because that correlates to money.
Right.
So what we did is we set up Baptist. We sat down with the physicians and we said, okay, come up with a plan for pre-diabetes. And theirs was really simple, and it was, I want you to reduce your blood glucose between this range. Started with that. And then we said, okay, what are the tasks that you want to give these individuals? And they started with a real kind of templated system. And they said, oh, we want people to walk, we want people to measure their blood glucose, we want them to take a picture of their food, and then we want to have 30 minutes of exercise, all trackable from all your devices. So they started with that. And then we said, okay, what do you want to monitor? And they said, what do you have? I said, we have everything. So we have nutrition, we have vitals. So how do we get nutrition? We get nutrition from all the apps that you guys use, which is MyFitnessPal, MyPlate, all those things that you guys use on a daily basis. You just continue using those, and we'll gather the information for you, and then send that. So they picked, carbohydrates, protein, calories consumed, heart rates, blood glucose. And then they said, okay, we're ready. So then the participants had iPod touches because they didn't have phones. We
They
gave them,
didn't have phones because they were socioeconomic, or you just,
Some of them had phones, the ones that
okay,
didn't.
but you just gave everybody, okay?
as part of the project,
Okay.
as part of the project with
This is
Baptist,
your,
they
okay,
said, okay, we're gonna give people iPod touches, let's see
Okay.
how that works.
okay,
Which was a challenge for our system because if you guys know how those work, you have to be connected to Wi-Fi,
yeah.
right? So,
So how
but,
do you do that?
so we had a lot of success. What we do is, when all the information is being collected, we send it once the Wi-Fi comes up. So, but that's all encrypted,
Okay.
on your actual device,
And you got them sent to where?
to our cloud,
To your cloud?
yeah.
And your cloud was where?
So our stack, if you want to know our stack, so our stack, it's changed a lot, and when you guys get startups, you'll pivot on your stacks. It's kind of flavor of choice, but we started with a Cassandra stack, which is a large database. We scaled down to a Rails. We do Rails, AWS. We have a middle layer of Node. We use, what else? What else do we have? Postgres for our database, a SQLite database. And then we use all AWS to store
Okay,
everything.
so all AWS,
Yep.
you use,
They're HIPAA compliant cloud.
Right.
They have their own encryption. We do their notification. So we used to start with Urban Airship, which was another notification center, and we scaled to AWS, so we're a full AWS stack. We've done integrations with Aetna, which is a large Epic. We've done a large health organization, EHR. We've done Epic. What else?
Athena Health, we're doing.
Athena Health, yes, Athena Health.
And we're gonna be doing Cerner.
so in that case, where's your challenge? For you as a tech
For
person?
the integrations?
Yes.
Yeah, so.
They build crappy software.
I know.
Exactly. So one thing you'll learn is that when you have legacy systems, they're not able to handle that much volumes of data.
Right.
So what you have to do is be smart about how
Because
you.
they're old systems.
Yeah. Yeah, and anytime you do an integration, you have a mapping layer, some sort of transformation layer. So like a layer that comes in where the information is coming to you, and you gotta normalize it to whatever you're going to. And that is the biggest problem in any integration. It's the one that takes the longest. The government is trying to come up with a new standard called HL7, but it's not widely adopted. So a lot of our integrations are custom integrations. But what we did is we built a mapping layer that we have, and we just modularize it. So that way when we're like, oh, we need to do Athena, boom, modularize Athena. We need to do an Epic, modularize
So
Epic.
once you get the data, then you then send it back to the organization and the
Exactly.
patient?
Athena does a great job. They kind of tell you, so this is how we want the information. This is how you're going to bill for it. This is how the physicians are going to bill for it. So we kind of took their instructions and mapped it to that and transformed all the data.
And
So-
how big is your team?
We have 4 people. So we believe in a model called 10Xers.
We used to have about 17 people in the team, we had them for a while. And then, we really couldn't get, we have a test that we do, which is similar to the same test that Apple goes in there when you try to go in as a student, as a engineer. Or Google, they do the same kind of test, they're intensive.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get anybody to pass it in this area.
Yeah, just so you guys know, if you.
We stopped doing that, we hired some people and then,
They didn't
we
pan
got-
out.
yeah, and, so now what we have a smaller team that works hard and produces a lot of code. But of course, we've been writing the software for 3 years, so. we
So you
have-
don't outsource any of your,
No,
those
I
4?
don't outsource.
So so everything is
That's
within
Everything's
your,
in-house, yeah.
so your role is what?
The director, I kind of manage everything,
So you manage and then you get
architect and all that.
the architect for it, okay.
I've seen a lot of people are doing that onshoring. They tried the outsourcing for all these years and they're pulling it all back.
It's
Right,
horrible.
It's
It's
yeah.
horrible.
We work with systems that do that, and it's just you get what you pay for, and it's, there's no passion behind anything that you do. You should always have passion in what you do, but when you contract or you outsource, you're gonna lose that passion. So back to these participants got these plans, and we monitored them for 6 months, and then at the 6-month mark, we said, okay, come in. And there was a team monitoring them. They had a few nurses that were using this, and the engagement was great. We had great numbers. We had a person that lost 25 pounds lowered their A1C almost 6-7 points. Their Life Simple 7 score was down almost 8 points. So we had a lot of great progress with that and great success. So, but that's our stack. I mean, I don't know if you want, I don't know how technical you want to get.
Or first I'll open it up to the students if you have any questions.
So, in terms of aggregating all this data, I mean, obviously you get permissions, but what are the biggest challenges you had with aggregating this data? I mean, you were talking about people write crappy software, and APIs are often terrible. Sort of what were the kind of challenges? How did you overcome those?
I think the hardest problem we had to solve wasn't necessarily the storing of the data or the aggregation of the data. It's how do you engage the consumer? Like if you guys don't know this, you have about a minute at most for engagement in each app. Other than that, you're gonna lose them. If you require them to be longer than a minute, it's either a social media platform or you're an awesome app. But you only have about a minute. So what we did, the hardest part for us was to design the software so that you didn't use the software. And that was the hardest thing. Consumers, building an app for consumers is difficult.
We had some challenges in the beginning. So we used to have a team of around 20 people. We've scaled it down, we're around 10 people right now. But we scaled it down because we built all the software and now we're more in a maintenance mode and enhancement mode. But in terms of challenges, at one point, from a group of 4 people, we could be collecting 2-3 million data points a week. So one of the things that we did is we spent a lot of time and engineering into making sure that it wasn't going to use up your data plan. So we compressed everything, we encrypted everything. And the other one was that we didn't want the data collection to affect the performance of your phone. So we spent a lot of time and money. Those were huge challenges.
And so subsequently, then now that you have this, what are you finding are your main challenge areas? Now that you've built the software, you have a platform that's functional, you're getting partners. What do you find are your current challenges that are different to during development?
I would say that it's the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
It's very antiquated. The government created HL7 for exchanging data, patient data. Well, the healthcare providers don't want to exchange that data. They want to control it. And so the healthcare industry, they all know that we want to move to a value-based healthcare system where it's not rescue-based, it's value-based. But it's the same thing that happened to the music industry before iTunes came out, right? They were all fat, dumb, and happy and saying, we're going to keep selling records, and they would sell you a CD. You guys are too young, but a CD was $15 and it had 13 songs, and you only wanted one, so you had to pay $14.99 for the whole thing. And then they came out originally, by the way, Apple wanted to put the songs at 49 cents, and the music industry didn't allow it. They put it 99 cents, and they put DRM, digital rights management, so you couldn't duplicate it. But, and then they went away. There's no longer, all the music now is in the cloud. Well, the same thing is happening to the healthcare system. And there's a guy also from Apple that gives speeches, and he tells a story, and I'm gonna tell you the story because I think it's relevant. He says, look, like in the late 1800s, we didn't have ice. And so you'd have 2 guys that go out and they break ice and they bring you ice. And so the problem was you had to be relatively close to the ice source. You couldn't get it down here before. That was version 1 of the ice factory, right? Version 2 was they built these huge factories, they got horses, and now they could deliver ice, but you still had to be relatively close. And then version 3 was your personal refrigerator, right? And now all those go away. The interesting thing is that none of the companies that created the leap from version 1 to 2 or to 3 were actually in the business. They came from outside. So often in an industry, you find that the industry can't innovate because they're so focused on, let's make it I don't know, I'm sure you guys know, Henry Ford used to say, if I would have asked people, they would have asked me to make faster horses, right? And so, that's the problem. That happened to Apple, they did the iPhone. They were not in the phone business. And everyone in the phone business said they're gonna fail.
Well, it's almost like disrupting that technology. You see it from outside rather than.
Yeah, you have to give it another focus. So our biggest challenge is the healthcare industry. We're seeing now, after several years engaging them, that a lot of the people that have been with us are starting to get it. And they're seeing, you know what, people don't really wanna come to the hospital.
But
You
it's,
know?
but it has been in the past for reimbursement.
Yes,
It's been the
it still
problem.
is, so that's
So
another
that- so
challenge.
that's a problem.
The reimbursement model is based around.
So if
rescue
you're
methods.
healthy, I don't, and I as a physician, I don't get paid. You don't come
Right.
to see me, I don't get paid. If I talk to you via email, if I talk to you via a secure telehealth, in the past, I haven't gotten paid. That's gonna change. So
Yeah, the
when I
model
get
is prevention is out of pocket, and rescue, you're gonna get reimbursed. In reality, they need to, it would be ideal if they flip that.
It's basically, if I give you 5 surgeries, I make money. If I give you only one, you never get surgery because you're well, I don't get money. So
Right.
it's those types of things. But where do you fit in, I guess, in in that business model?
We're
Where do
totally
you think-
screwed. We're
Huh?
completely screwed. I'm just kidding. No, we're prevention. We're prevention, right?
No,
So
but
our-
so you go after the Aetnas, you go after those EHR systems, where do you see, I guess,
What
you
we're
go
seeing
over
progress is
after
in population
Apple?
health, and remote monitoring for like diabetes prevention, which is gonna be reimbursed in 2018 for the first time ever. I think after that, they're gonna do hypertension, because they're just such huge components of our cost of healthcare.
And what about that whole idea of using social media in the way that I think if I wanna get better health-wise, if I have a group of people, they can encourage me to get
That's true, so
better.
we actually have a project that we're working on, a grant for using social media to help with medication adherence, right? It's just that stuff is difficult because not everybody reacts the same. What we wanna do is we wanna create, artificial intelligence-based chatbots that adapt to your personality. You know, some people have a personality that they like a general to control, like me, I'm married to a general, kind of. Other people have a personality that they like positive reinforcement. And so depending on, what we wanna do is match a bot to your personality and use that, virtual assistant to sort of help you reach your goals.
So it'll be able to say, I need to go exercise after that and tell me it's now 6:30.
Well, I think it picks up patterns, it understands you, it understands
That
your
it's Monday, Wednesday,
habits,
you
your
finish,
lifestyles.
Yeah,
finish
maybe
the
they like
class.
to walk at night and not in the morning, or those kinds of things, to try to, different people react differently to different
And what
kinds of
about
information.
predictive analytics? Are you gonna get into that business too?
Oh, yeah, we are in
Yeah.
that business, we just don't have, we have about 20,000 assessments today. For predictive analytics to work, you need 200,000 or whatever, so
Yeah.
we're on our way there.
And we're looking at the heart rates, you know, we're getting large volumes of data.
And who's helping, who's doing the analytics or the big data for you to do any of that
There's guys in
forecasting?
house that do that.
We've
What?
connected to
Yeah.
Watson Health, to, GE has a artificial
Predix.
intelligence engine called Predix, DeepMind from Google. We don't care, we just pick the best one out of those and use it.
Yeah, we have the data, so we'll funnel it through them. It's just really coming up with a model and, you know, what you're trying to find, what you're trying to solve. It's really what you need.
The problem is that they've created so much hype around AI, that it makes it difficult, because people ask you to do stuff that's impossible to do,
Yeah.
you know, so.
And it has to be they don't understand, it has to be a very narrow problem.
At
Yeah,
this
just
point,
solve
we
a
just don't
simple
have a lot.
problem.
But
Everyone
a
wants to
very,
solve a
very-
big, huge thing.
Right, but it has to
Solve
be
something
very
really simple,
narrow.
start there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you think is your biggest threat right now then? In terms of something that could disrupt, because you guys are disrupting a huge industry right now. So what do you think sort of now and going forward would be your biggest threat then to disrupt your industry?
We have threats from very large companies that are, for example, Cerner or Epic. Every time they sell a hospital, I don't know if you know this, it's typically $100 to $200 million for the installation of the software. And that's pretty crappy software. I said it as a joke, but it's really pretty crappy software.
Absolutely imagine.
And, they're threatened by us. And so they could crush us, because we're a small company.
Yeah, being bought out and shutting you down was probably the biggest thing, the scariest thing, right? Because we started something with a vision, and a competitor could come in, buy you, and then close you up. And then
Yeah,
that's
but
it.
I think the genie's out of the box.
Yeah, I agree.
I think maybe what it is more a threat from an Apple or a Google.
That's true too. I
You
mean,
understand
everybody's
that-
working to solve the same problem.
They're all, if you think about any of these people that you've seen, it's all the same issues that everybody's dealing with. How do you monitor consistently? How do you get feedback
Yeah.
to the patient? And somebody like an Apple, or even the idea of video. We had Modernizing Medicine
Yes.
here, one of the physicians that's also at UM.
Yeah.
And they were here, and their model was, they had their iPad, and one of the problems people were thinking is, the physician doesn't even wanna go through all those processes and answering it, but it's almost that combination of video and voice, and then if you get somebody intelligent, that I can record
Yeah.
our sessions with you, and then try to be intelligent and do structured.
Yeah, and I think that's where there are areas of machine learning today that can help. For example, when we do video conferencing in our software, we'll take the audio and we'll send it to Watson and have it transcribed. And we have it pick up keywords and sentiments, so they tell you the person is hesitating or they're frustrated. It's not 100%, but
But it
it
started.
enhances the customer service experience, right? So those things are usable, and we're trying to use them. Another one we wanna use is analysis of the skin, because when a doctor is in front of you, they're looking at your skin, they're looking at your facial, and when you're going through a video conference, you don't see those details well, right? And so we're starting to try to do those kinds of things, so we can give that feedback back to the doctor.
And
so
it's
that
probably
they can
even
use it.
voice stress, you can think about.
Exactly, voice
the
stress is a great
where,
one.
where somebody said, how much pain are you in?
Yeah,
I'm sure there's ideas, and then how many people lie to their doctor?
yeah.
Lie to
everybody
their
likes the
dentist,
doctor.
how many times did they say, oh, do you floss every day, you know, are you eating right? You know, they ask you these questions, what am I gonna tell the
And that's
doctor?
the
No, I'm
beauty
not
of
eating
the-
right, right?
That's the beauty of the monitor, so diabetics, tend to lie about their blood sugar, right, because they learn to control it, right? And one of the things that we find with our system is it makes it a lot harder to lie, because they just measure the blood sugar, and we're taking those values and giving them to the doctor. So, also, you can't be lying all the time, you know, eventually you lose track of the pattern. So, that's one of the benefits of this monitoring. Number one, that you can be getting the values all the time, and the other one is that you can establish patterns that you couldn't otherwise do if the person's coming in and wants something.
So you started this company how long ago?
We started almost 4 years ago.
So you've been together 4 years?
Yeah.
You started
He
from
took
the
me
very.
from Apple, he stole me.
Maybe
We've
you
actually
stole
been
that.
together like 20 years because we spent so much time together.
Oh, right.
Weekends together.
Right,
Yeah.
so it's the 4 years, and your goal is what? Is to partner with somebody like an Apple to buy you, or?
No,
a
well,
G-
maybe, Apple's actually talking to us. We don't really wanna be bought out yet. I mean,
And how are you doing in terms of funding?
we're doing horribly. We're asking for money in the corner and
And why do you think, but
No.
I'm saying there's so much healthcare.
we've raised,
and-
almost
and
$7 million.
7 million, and why are people not putting more money? Why do you think people are not putting more money?
Oh, no,
into
they
it?
are. We're talking to people that are interested in putting more money. It's just difficult to raise money. There's a lot of hype. So everybody says, I'm doing this and doing that.
Right.
But how you're doing it makes a huge difference, right? It's not the same to see a Bentley or a Porsche, or see, you know, a car that's not at that level. It costs different amounts of money to make each one of those things. So, for us, our success has always been when we're able to show the software, allow people to play with it, because our focus is the consumer and simplifying the whole process for the healthcare provider and for the consumer. And engaging the consumer, because one of the problems with healthcare today is the consumer is not at all engaged. Yeah, they come to your office, they wait for 2 hours, you bill them, and that's it, but you don't know who they are, you don't care, you know? And so the consumer, it's really weird, the healthcare provider is not the payer is not the healthcare provider, and the patient is neither. And so it becomes really weird. And we want the consumer more involved so that they feel accountable, so that it enhances the whole healthcare process. That sounds
Yeah.
pretty good.
But it's a good, it definitely is gonna change, and especially here in the United States, this healthcare is atrocious. We spend the most money and we get the least amount of,
Yeah, we have a lot of problems because, for example, there's some cases where you go to a doctor and the doctor wants to do the right thing, but they're afraid that you're gonna sue them. And now they're gonna make you do all these tests, and they're gonna make you spend a whole ton of money, and they're doing it because they don't wanna get sued, or if they do get sued, they wanna have proof.
Well, it's not also evidence-based. I read today an
They're
article.
evidence-based, no,
It's
there
not
isn't.
evidence-based. You know, have you ever seen about when people have clogged arteries and they do angioplastic and then they put in a balloon to clear your arteries and everybody's really feeling good about it? Well, it turns out there's thousands of procedures like that. And they show you a picture, you almost have a clogged artery, and all of a sudden it's clear. What would everybody feel? Wow, right?
Right.
They've now done studies, and it makes no difference. There's almost that effect, you know, like how they have the halo effect, that you feel that, first of all, you went through that procedure, they're good. So they did a study where they put in a wire, right, in your groin, right? But they didn't do the ballooning, and they didn't do it, and they found out there was no difference between the two groups. So here they've spent millions of dollars, and everybody felt like the consumer said, hey, it worked, but no one was any better. So you have all these types of
Yeah.
tests, but there's not been any evidence based on
Yeah.
it, but the doctors like it, right, because they're gonna charge.
No,
And
and a
then
lot
you're
of
saying-
times they don't know. For example, we deal with a lot of diabetic patients, and depending on your blood glucose and where you wanna take it is the amount of insulin you take. Well, the average doctor doesn't have a sophisticated algorithm to tell you, take
How much?
this much. So they just tell you, take this much, and that may be too much. And we have people that are spending $600 a month in insulin, right? Well, if you could reduce that by $300 by half, just because they administered it right, you know, which is some of the stuff that we're doing, precision medicine, right? Where you take, our software is gonna be able to tell you, okay, your blood glucose is this is how much insulin you should do. And there's pens that are coming out that through Bluetooth allow us to know how much they actually put in.
So do they care about when you're providing this, like to a Cerner or to even the Baptist Health? They're concerned about security. You assure them just, and you say, I'm using AWS, and
think it's-
AWS is
yeah.
Oh, and that's
compliant?
meeting with security with a hospital, I mean,
It's
I've met at
terrible.
least 40 times with 40 people at a time.
That's a blocker for us right there.
So-
And
That's
do
another
they even
challenge.
know?
They don't know much, but they roadblock a lot,
Right there.
So
so
they just say, don't, they're afraid, so they
they're
just.
afraid. to
They're afraid,
find-
but they don't give you any, but how can they tell that you are secure?
We prove
Yeah,
it to
they give
them.
you a document, well, not a document, it's like a book, and they say, fill this out. And then
All
they-
kinds of questions.
all kinds of questions, and you fill it out, right, and you tell them, and it's all, you know, what type of certs do you do, are you SSL, are you TSL, you know, the whole thing, you fill it all out, and then you submit it back to them, and they say, okay, we approve it. Do they read it or not, I don't know.
Right.
But, you know, part of the problem with security is traffic, they block a lot of traffic, so inside of the office, when you're a third party, you're gonna get cert issues, because they just haven't, you know, if you introduce a new API, or if you introduce something else, there's a whole process that has to, or if you do versioning, so you version your APIs and you go from version 1 to version 2, you gotta go resubmit the certs, so,
Okay, thank you very much.
Any questions we can answer?
yeah.
And so what are you
Any
looking,
technical
so
questions?
what are you looking to, hire?
Huh?
Are you looking to hire interns?
Yes, send us, I'll leave you my card,
And
and
what is that?
Anyone in AI, we like
we're looking to
AI.
do some AI, and we're looking to do some augmented reality
Yeah.
stuff, so fun stuff.
Augmented reality, there I think that really could be a next, to do something with augmented, that you actually see the real world plus of, you know,
Yeah,
rather than.
I think that's gonna be great for a lot of things like depression, PTSD, in some cases maybe encouragement, right? I don't know, but we have some projects that we're gonna be playing with. So always stay in touch with us, we're pretty open, so if you guys wanna come by the office or talk or whatever.
Yeah, and if you guys ever wanna talk tech, email me about that. We
Okay,
do
do
it
you
all the
wanna,
time.
do you have cards or something?
I
that
do.
we can-
I'll give it. No, it doesn't let me give out my card anyway. Nah, he poached me from Apple, so he doesn't want that same thing to happen again.
So you have my.
You guys developing now?
email.
Okay, great.
And, you guys can contact.
Yeah, like, what are you guys doing?
Well, I don't give up,
Projects?
sorry.
What are you working on?
Currently,
People try to hire me.
working on, I work on my Linux tool for all
Oh,
my
Linux.
stuff.
Yeah.
But,
iCloud's built on Linux, Linux
actually,
machines,
I actually do not know that.
yeah, tons of Linux machines, server farms.
But yeah, basically, the current project that I'm working on in terms of web stuff is some GUI stuff regarding 3D stuff. So I'm looking at implementing a 3D platform to an application to allow you to manipulate the room. And you know how they're doing new stuff with the AR kit.
Yeah.
Kind of like how IKEA has that.
Yeah.
AR kit is awesome.
AR is
That
awesome.
app is really great. Like,
Yeah, man, and Apple did something great for any AR developers. They unlocked every single phone now has AR capability. So if you're an AR developer, you just have that many more developers now. So, yeah, I like
some
some of
interesting
the buyers.
stuff I'm trying to.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank
Well,
you,
thank
Norm.
you guys very much.
Thank you very much. It's good to see somebody in town that are doing something, okay?
Sorry?
It's good to see somebody in town doing something.
Yes.
Right, that we don't have to go out to Silicon Valley,
I
right?
know.
I didn't tell you, but Cuban coffee is the reason I came.
That
That
was
was the thing.
Okay, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
nice to meet you. Thank you.
Okay, so Tom, you wanna
All
give
right.
these folks basically what your
Sure.
background is?
Cybersecurity, it's getting crazy out there. I'm Tom Packard. I was the founding CTO at CareCloud, which is a company here. We raised $130 million. All told, before startups that I've worked at and started, we've raised over $250 million here in South Florida. This
And
is
they're
a-
all healthcare.
all healthcare, sensors, healthcare. The new one I'm working on is gonna be bigger than all the other four put together. I mean, we already have the IP, we've already built the product.
Do you
I'm
have it
actually-
there?
What?
Do you have it, that little, this is
And-
kinda interesting. He basically has a sensor for the vagus nerve. You put it in your ear, right, and it's supposed to help for depression.
And so they're founding, it's called Software as a Drug is a new thing. Search on digital therapeutics, bioelectricity, because you'll share that other slide deck with me.
Yeah.
There's a really good TED Talk I included in the other slide deck about how now medical researchers are getting into using electricity to stimulate the growth of different
So wait-
hormones and different nerves.
Right, I just wanna
endings
give
and-
him, but this
So-
is his new company,
so, yeah.
where it's vagus nerve, so basically, they're doing this in order, they're thinking that it will then help with depression. So basically, you'll have that device, and then it will then, basically then,
But what I have to do is build out the whole infrastructure, just like the guys at LifeWallet did. I have to record all this data from all these sensors and talk to them and being
so you
bi-directional,
see
share
how where it
data.
is, so,
So-
like, how do you collect all that data, and then how do you do predictive analytics on all that data?
And I'll show you a slide, it's not in here, I'll show you a slide of the infrastructure that we're building out, and it'll give you a picture of how far we have to go, just as a startup today. We didn't have to do that. The other thing you should know is, he asked the question, and that's the way it's been, like, a hospital wants to do business with you. Now hospitals and the Aetnas and the Optums, they're saying, I want you to be CSF certified, Common Security Framework. You've got to know that. If you're in cybersecurity and healthcare, you need to be familiar with the Common Security Framework. I've spent the last year and a half doing that for CareSync in Tampa. It is grueling. We did all the work, but trying to get all the policies in place and all the tools, and then getting the staff to keep up and change their policies and change their behaviors, that's very hard. So it's gonna be another 6 months now after I've got all this stuff in place, all the tools, but now to actually transition it into the whole organization so people are reflexive. Because what they're measuring is, do you have the policy? Do you have the procedure? And these are all different scores that you get. And then they need proof that you've implemented it. So if you're doing background checks, they're gonna go into your HR files and they're gonna say, show me the date he signed his agreement to work, show me the date on the background check on that employee. So they're really going into great detail. They have assessors that go in and look. Then the next steps that nobody's doing yet, because you only have to get a 66% right now, the next steps in the Common Security Framework is then you have to have monitoring and managed. And those are the next steps of saying, okay, you had a security incident, how did all that flow back and to reassess the policies and procedures to avoid that from happening again? So with that, I'm going to segue into something on cybersecurity that all the security starts from the users. The users are still our biggest problem. I mean, we can secure the servers, we can secure the infrastructure, but it's still the user. The users are getting tricked. The users are using bad passwords. So what I'm gonna do is show you LastPass. Does anybody here use LastPass?
No, it's simpler.
One.
What's that? Just one. So LastPass is what I recommend to everybody using a password manager. I use it with a YubiKey that I carry with me all the time. I have a duplicate of my YubiKey in a safe at home, but I don't know what my passwords are. So like Google allows you to have 50 and 100 character passwords, they generate that. And we're gonna actually do a hands-on demo. This isn't just gonna be a slide. But if you wanna have it vet, if anybody's in security, listen to the Steve Gibson Security Now podcast.
By the way, these slides are on our slides and Blackboard. These slides, if you go to our slides, you'll see the slides.
And there's a link there to the podcast. But if you started episode 1 and came all the way forward, they're into this like 13 years now. It's like a master's in IT. They have a whole multiple episodes with how the internet works, how DNS works, how SSL works, all this different encryption. So they call him the explainer in chief. You don't want to be reusing passwords on different sites. Your password is only as strong as the weakest site you learned it on. All those people that went on the Ashley Madison site, and then they go out to Facebook after they breach one, and they reuse that password on all these other sites, and you don't ever want to reuse your password. Well, how can you if you're trying to remember them? The standard now is length is more important for entropy, and finally NIST is coming back around and saying, forget about that complexity, forget about special characters, numbers, and capitals. The more important thing is to take all those passwords when somebody puts it in, run it against a list of 10 million known weak passwords, and don't allow them to use any of that, or make it 100 million, or whatever that number is. That's more important. And length is more important than entropy. Get people in the habit. Start telling people that. So they're finally reversing that. And then anywhere you can, use multi-factor authentication. And that's not, the SMS system on the phone is weaker. It's easier to spoof. It was never designed for security. Get the Google Authenticator, which is what looks here, and it's what's called a time-based one-time pad. So this is unique to your device, and it'll say enter the code for that device. Or I really like the YubiKey here, and it generates, all you do is you plug it in your USB, you touch it, it generates a long string. That's what it looks like. And then they're fairly expensive. They're about $50 a piece. But that's what I use to secure my LastPass. And then I make a copy of this, and there's one in the safe. God forbid I lose my wallet, I would never be able to get into any of my passwords. So what we're going to do is demonstrate how we're going to use LastPass. So I'm going to call up LastPass, and we're going to do the kind of things that you can do. You add it into all your browsers, so it's just automatically there. And if you pay, it's like $2 a month. Then it'll work on all your iPads, your iPhones, so you never have to remember any of your passwords. Like in the old days, oh, what's the password? And you have to go over to your iPad and type it in. Now you just click on the link and it takes you right there, which helps with spoofing of the address because you're always clicking on links. You can save sites, all your sites there, and it'll just automatically fill in. So you go browse to a site and it just automatically fills in your password and user ID for you. It also has a generate secure passwords feature. You can save notes. So I do things like save, how to SSH into a particular server, what the IP address is, whatever, and you can save your SSL keys right in there. But if I want to have notes, so I've done that like as part of sysadmin work, we'll say, this is how you SSH into the fax server, or you telnet into the fax server. And then you share that with the other admins, and then you can either revoke. So we do that as teams, to be able to share passwords, like things like a fax server, where you're not going to create different users for every user who's an admin on it. There's a really great feature on here called the Security Challenge. So it'll actually grade you. It'll read through all your passwords in the browser, because when it stores your passwords, it's sending a giant encrypted blob up to LastPass. It's strong encryption, hasn't been broken yet, and it only gets decrypted on your browser. So this Security Challenge runs through and says, how many times have you reused passwords? How long are your passwords? And then it has a really nice feature that says, we've detected all these email addresses in your system. We're going to go out and compare that to all the databases of people who've been compromised and breached. It's a great value add because you're sitting there, oh, you used to have a Yahoo account. and it's still in your LastPass, you go click, and all of a sudden you find out, oh, my Yahoo account is on one of these databases that's been breached. Secure notes, I save like photocopies of my driver's license, my passport, and put it right into that secure note. So again, if you lost those things, you could just print them out. You can share your other passwords, and then now they have the new LastPass families, which is perfect for me. I have 4 kids, and I can just get them and say, okay, here's the password for Netflix, or here, but I can revoke it, I can give it to them where they can't see it and use it, or they can actually be able to see it. We're gonna jump on that one. Kind of small and low resolution. So I'm gonna open my,
So we're doing what, and so we're.
so this is a LastPass in the browser. So I clicked on the link over here that opens up LastPass in the browser. So I'll use Cooks Illustrated as a password. So if I want to, or let's just go to something harmless, Nest. So just by clicking on that link, it's going to take me into Nest, automatically fill in my password, and log me in. So that's a lot easier. Like, I didn't even have to go look up my password or anything, but I can, everybody's away.
So they're out having
Yeah.
fun, right?
Yeah. So, so I can go and control, but I wouldn't want just anybody going into my password, but I have to have a strong password. So when you go to do a new password, it's detecting that all the time. So like if I change the password here in the site, it's going to detect, hey, you were in a password field. Would you like me to update LastPass with that? But it's syncing across the Chrome, the iPad, and the Firefox or Safari, whatever browsers, because it's going out, grabbing that encrypted blob, and then bringing it down and decrypting it in your browser. So it's very easy to search for things if I want to do root. So AWS root keys, like I wouldn't want anybody to ever get those things. Now, one thing I don't store in LastPass is the QR code. So when you use Google Authenticator, do not save the QR code, especially for your Amazon things. If you guys know what, because that's the biggest thing. People are putting their AWS root keys out there, they get found, and they're pwned. It's really bad. So when you do that, save the QR code, print it out, because if you change your phone, you've got to go get all those QR codes to repopulate Google Authenticator. Otherwise, you have to go call Amazon, tell them to turn off multi-factor authentication. But if you have 10 or more services using that, it's going to be, so it's easier just to save the QR code, print it out, save it in a file somewhere. So if you want to go look at notes, you can, that should be an old one. So you can just edit notes, and then you can save the type. You can add an attachment, but you can do different. Make it a favorite, but you can save, like, what is it? I'm just trying to find it now, so it's one.
And what about security flaws
Yeah.
with this?
Okay,
What's
so,
on the browser?
well, like here, you just pick the note type, and then it's gonna prompt you for what was the bit strength, and so it has custom based on that type, so what type of secure note that you're saving.
So wait, so I could store a PGP key, for example, in LastPass, and like in it know what the format is, exactly
Yeah,
what the strength is.
Exactly. So if I were to say create a new note here, oops, those are my keys. So you put it in folders, or you pick, you want an address, a bank account, credit card, database keys, home driver's license. And the nice thing there is I'm always cutting and pasting. Like if I try to order stuff without LastPass, all that annoying of having to type in your address and stuff all over again and cut and paste your credit card or stuff,
you don't have to do that, because now you just have the LastPass feature. You can say, fill those forms.
So when it detects you're on a new shop, and you can say, fill in the forms, and then it'll prompt you, because if you put if it detects a credit card number in there, it will ask you, do you want me to send the credit card to this form too? It'll double check. Because that was actually one of the sneaky ways they recently, just in the last year, did it. They were putting a hidden credit card collection field way over here on the web page, so you wouldn't see it. So you go in and you use any of these password managers where it fills in, and it's actually way over on the left. So they had, why are they allowing content on a web page that's not visible on the screen? So they had to fix that. So here's where you can say generate a strong password. I usually default to 25 characters. So it just generates that. You can copy the password if you want to put it somewhere. It shows you the nice history. Well, I don't have a history here. You would see the history, but you pick whether you want punctuations, minimum reuse, avoid ambiguous characters, make it pronounceable, depending what you want. So I usually just tell it generate something as long. Usually you get into some of the sites where it says can't be longer than 12 characters. Well, then I think that's really weak. No password should be less than 12 characters. Recently used. What's it? Okay. Go through that. So then if you go to the security challenge, this is where it was really nice. So you can say show my score.
And that's the only password you have to remember.
Yes.
Okay.
And so you make it a good one, and like
You didn't remember it.
What?
Oh.
That's the only
It's so
problem.
good.
That it doesn't remember.
But do you have your 2FA on your LastPass?
Yes.
Okay.
But because this is my machine and I've said trust it for 60 days, it's not re-prompting. But if I went to another machine, and when you go to the LastPass site, when you set up the account, you say, do you want to allow access only from the United States? And there's all sorts of security problems, like how many iterations of encryption should it go through when it generates? So I have an 88% score. I'm in the top 4% of all the LastPass users, and my LastPass password is 96 characters. So that's pretty good. We use this in enterprise. So then for all, when we're doing these healthcare stuff, I have to know whether my executives have strong passwords. Because if they don't have strong passwords, then we get things like the CEO, and this is a true story. What? The CEO went to New York. He's in the middle of raising. His Outlook account got compromised, his Office 365. They added a little hidden rule in there that forwarded all his emails that contain word financing, bank, all this stuff, forwarded it out and moved it into an RSS feed folder over here, but they were forwarding it outside the company, all because he clicked on one link. But they'll do things like OrthoSensor. They registered a name called OrthoSnezzer with Vistaprint, where you don't need a credit card to go. So then all of a sudden, they were able to imitate the CEO talking to the CFO, talking to the accounting controller, saying, wire this money now, why isn't this done yet? And this guy actually called back 4 times in a day. Where is this money going? Because they're really under pressure, but they're really counting on the fact that if you put enough pressure on the account, they'll just wire it. And Vistaprint actually got busted that day until the CFO and the CEO met at the coffee, and they said, oh, I wired that money. What money? Yeah, it was like, it's $50,000. And that was the other most clever hack I've seen this year. It was a guy who had invented malware, nobody knows who he is, that looks for Bitcoin addresses in the copy and paste buffer. So then, yeah, it's really smart. So this guy goes, like, was wiring $30,000 worth of Bitcoin to somebody, copy, paste, changed it, doesn't know where the $30,000 went.
Yeah, because no one manually types out a Bitcoin because
Right.
those things are huge.
Yeah.
Those things are long and
Yep.
obfuscated.
My brother-in-law is a real estate lawyer. Same thing, his firm got hit where the email went out as a Word doc. It arrived 2 hours later, slightly changed, and it arrived as a PDF at the client, telling him with wiring instructions.
Oh, they changed the wiring.
They changed the wiring account. Everything else was the same, But somebody was a man in the middle in there that somebody intercepted it. So the guy, there's so much money in cybercrime, and we're always behind.
So that's LastPass. So if you want some extra tools that you can use, most of them are free. Definitely, if your drives aren't encrypted, encrypt them. Don't let another day or week go by. You know, FileVault 2 is awesome. Take a look if you ever need to do manage Macs at scale. There was one from the large systems conference. Google manages 35,000 Macs worldwide with only 5 admins using a product called Simian. It's open source. Jump Cloud. If you have to set up any friends or families, sign them up for Jump Cloud. It's directory as a service. It gives you Samba, Active Directory, SSO, so any friends, and it's free up to 10 users. So you can go, now you can have single sign-on for all these accounts. So if you're on Teamwork, so if you want to have G Suite with Atlassian, Confluence, and Jira, you hook them up with Jump Cloud, and you automatically have single sign-on for all your users.
This is the beginning of our
Okay,
startup.
JamF, if you need to manage Macs, if you have, you can, with JamF, that's also Casper. JamF now lets you manage up to 3 devices, your Mac, your iPad, and your iPhone, for free, forever. Lets you manage, remotely wipe, doesn't let you track it. Simple MDM is a little bit better. They got rid of their free version. They only have a free trial now. But that allows you on a graph, on a chart. I have all my kids' iPhones on that, so I can see exactly where they are right from that. But it allows me to remotely wipe it and push down policies. Another one, if you want to track, this is a little heavier. Orbicule Undercover allows you to turn on remotely. You report your Mac stolen. It starts turning on the camera, taking pictures, firing them off. So it's pretty cool. I put that on all the Macs that we deploy. Okay, happening right now. This is going on today. Hopefully it will never happen. Does everybody know what Mirai was and when they took down Amazon and Dyn, the DNS service? This is so much worse. So I'll leave this slide. This is called Reaper. This is happening right now. Nobody knows who's behind it. It's probably nation state, but as they say, it's state of the art IoT. But this is an example of all those routers that will never have patches on them. We've deployed the Internet of Insecure Things. These things were not designed to be out there on the internet. The AT&T Uverse had routers, all have vulnerabilities in them that they're not patching. But these are all old, Cisco routers and Linksys routers. They're out on the internet, they're being compromised. And Mirai was only 50,000 devices on there. This is 3.5 million already. And nobody knows, they haven't weaponized it, but if they do, if you had 50,000, look at what they could do with 50,000 devices. And only because they made it, you could just put a little DNS entry in and made it go away. But this is going on right now. This is building daily right now. So just want to let you know that this is what we're up against. And when I've been doing the CSF stuff for the last 1.5 years, and it feels like I was in this rip current of security just pulling out. It's like they tell you when you get caught in a rip current, no, don't panic, just swim sideways. But sometimes it feels like with this stuff that the shore is so far away that we don't even.
So what have they done with Reaper?
Nothing. Nobody knows. It's out there building daily right now. I mean, there's a link on that Reaper that takes you to the current site from F5 where they're tracking what this thing is doing. But this is a lot of people who didn't pay attention to security for many, many years, and they don't have to patch these things, but these things went out with vulnerabilities in them, and now they're being weaponized. But with a ThingBot of 3.5 million, you could do a lot of damage, and that's what people do, like the NTP, they call it bandwidth multiplication, so that if you go and say, send me a list of all your NTP servers, so you send one packet of 64 bytes, and you get back 500,000 bytes. Well, now what you do is you send that packet to all these NTP servers, spoofing the return address to be your home address, and now all the NTP servers on the internet are going to send back 500,000 bytes to you. You're offline. And that's, you know, these amplification attacks that Mirai does.
But it's not attacking anyone yet.
No, and hopefully it doesn't, because,
There's no way you
It's
run
almost
something
like the
that
calm
and don't
before the
attack.
storm.
yes, and so I just want you heard it here first.
There's no way.
That bigger. Now, this wasn't originally part of the, but since that guy talked about stack, this is the stack I'm building for my new code, Equality. So, security, because we're building this virtually. So we've raised $1 million, we're going for $20 million on April 1st. The way we're doing it, we're using Salesforce, and our accounting system will be accounting seed. We have to do subscription management, but then by using Google Suite, Ring Central, all these work with Jump Cloud, so single sign-on for a virtual team, single sign-on from that, that's all cloud-based. For managing the office, I love the Sophos firewalls, you can download those for free. It does Wi-Fi, it does your, you know, you can do country blocking, it gives you everything you want, it works very, very well. I love OSSec, that's an open source security, so then what you have to do is look for things that are changed. They call it, you know, it's log management and looking for anything that's changed in the configuration. Nessus is then looking for the alerts from the threats. They say, okay, we have this file that's being changed. Where's my alert coming so that I know about it? Manage Engine is how we deploy all Windows and Macs. JMF is how we manage the Macs. And then QNAP, you always want to have some local service, local file service, so you can put like a 20 terabyte QNAP, and that way your Macs can back up and use Time Machine to back up to this device, and then you sync that to S3. This thing does it very cheaply, plus it has single sign-on with Jump Cloud. Then, you know, using everything in AWS, the web application firewalls from them are fantastic. Terraform is the number 1 thing you should be looking at in terms of a security perspective, because Terraform it's a thing called infrastructure as code. There's a thing in IT, in a lot of servers that have been touched by hand, they have what we call configuration drift. Things that change subtly over time. Oh, Tom turned on SSL or SSH to the world because he hadn't had it. Tom forgets, he's out sick the next day, and then he forgets, and all of a sudden we've got SSH to the world turned on a Bastion server in the data center. We wouldn't want that. So Terraform deploys all your servers new. So no server ever gets modified. You change the recipe and you redeploy. So everything's going. So your code that defines the server is what you know is running in production. That's infrastructure as code. Chef does the configuration of service. So once Terraform puts it out there, Chef does the configuration. And then Docker is a new thing. It's kind of like, think of it as a lightweight virtual machine. So instead of having to repeat the whole kernel, you have a container. Docker actually came from the old S390 mainframe world. It was the way they had containers, they had Docker, and they donated all that code to Linux, and that became Docker containers. And so that we have this beautiful thing, because you get less overhead. You can run more containers on a machine than if you ran virtual machines. So you're using the hardware more efficiently.
So that's how mainframes manage resources, basically.
Yeah, it came from
It
the
came from
S390.
there.
But since there's only so many people are going to use it, by donating it to Linux, they multiply the power of Linux. So if you have Alien Vault, the other thing you guys have to have, if you run into a shop, and this comes from 1.5 years of remediating a company. So Alien Vault, or you could use Sumo Logic, it's called Security Incident and Event Management. So you have to send all your logs to a server, where then you have a graphical tool, because right in the old days, you'd be SSHing into that Apache server, and then you'd be tailing the log and tailing the error log, and then but if you have servers that are over here in AWS that spin up during the busy time of the day, they're only up for 8 hours, and then they're shut down. There's no server to log into anymore, so you have to get all your logs in here, so you have everything dump into your SIEM. I'd say 90% of the companies that I've dealt with that are in healthcare, put in cloud, don't have that in place. That's a requirement for the Common Security Framework. You have to, and AlienVault does, it was based on open source, but they tied the log management with alerting. So they did a really good job so that when they see this event in the logs, it's actually saying, hey, this is really bad. You know, this is, directory server, I'm a big fan of Postgres, don't ever use MySQL. Postgres is a better license. Then you run into healthcare, Redis is a caching layer. If you need to do Talon, what's that? Okay. Talon, if you need to do ETL, extract, transform, load, that's a great tool, again, open source. If you need to do HL7, we like Mirth, there's a new thing called Fire. I'm personally a big fan of Rundeck. If most people used to use cron jobs to schedule things, run in the background, well then, again, you're back doing SSH into the server, looking, did it run, didn't it run? Rundeck gives you a nice little graphical console. You can see all the jobs running, how long they run. It can actually spin out different worker machines. So instead of it running on, cron jobs running on one server, you can say spin up a server to run this job, spin up another one to run this job, spin up another, and then grab your code from GitHub, run, shut down, turn off. So it's a perfect thing to combine with AWS because you can run up servers, spin up servers by code as part of the job, shut down, and they're not consuming resources. Only other thing for security, business software development, Veracode. Get into these static and dynamic code scanning. Veracode is very good. You go out and you subscribe to it. It's not open source, unfortunately. It actually scans through your PHP code or your Ruby code, or if it's C++ or C#, it reads through the binaries, and it looks for vulnerabilities that it knows about, and then it tells it as part of the commit process. It's telling the developer, hey, you just introduced a cross-site scripting vulnerability or a SQL injection vulnerability, but it knows that. So that's another new thing people have to get into. Is like, we haven't really had experts that review our code for security.
And how often is that updated in CVE? So like
Every single day.
Okay, so
Every single day. Yeah, and then there's other tools like Qualys, where you can actually run scans that are updated from the CVEs every single day. Yeah, because you may have been, if your scan ran on Sunday night, there's a new vulnerability found on Monday, you want to know about it Monday night when it runs. And that's basically it. That's the stack
That's
of
a
a new
nice
company
slide.
that's being built.
That's
So,
a very nice slide. Very good.
enough of that, I can't.
Yeah, so that's very nice. So you kind of use that for all your companies?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very nice. Cool, thank you.
So, any questions? Over? Okay. Well, thanks for your extra time, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, but it was very good. I can see, so now it, basically, I guess you're kind of also a consultant for new companies to tell them how do you set up that infrastructure.
Yes, and that's,
It would be even a good thing to work with Norb and getting them,
Yes.
because it seems like they really don't,
They've
they're new
kinda-
to healthcare completely.
They've
You
kinda
understand,
taken
they're
some
from
shortcuts.
Apple coming in and they're saying to themselves, what should I do now with healthcare? And you've been in so many years in healthcare to give them that background.
and
They're
to give
good,
it my-
they're great
yeah,
coders,
my-
but they
my
really don't know the healthcare.
favorite
market
example
well.
of the atrophy of skills in healthcare is in 2004, when I was in neighborhood health, the head of operations kept referring to the desktop publishing team, there were 5 of them, as typesetting. But that was the mindset, that in 2004, the VP of operations is calling them typesetters. I said, they're desktop publishers, they are not typesetters, but they're just way,
Well, and also that industry has been always way behind any other
And
industry.
it's who you know, not, because you have to have your friends and they only hire other friends. So it's really hard to break in. And even when I met with the C-suite of Optum, and the first thing out of all their questions was, what are we gonna do about Epic? This is how the battling is going on inside of healthcare. You've got Optum, the biggest payer in United Healthcare, that's their data side of the United Healthcare, saying, what are we gonna do about Epic, which is also known as Judy's Cult. Judy Faulkner is the founder of Epic. But it's an old database, it's a schema-less database called MUMPS. It's never had to
The
really do
VA,
upgrades.
That's probably from 1970,
Yeah.
And that's what we went with.
huh?
And that's what we went with.
And you know how many millions we have paid for that? I mean,
Oh.
but it's been that disruptive, that's what I'm waiting for, those kind of.
I was in medical when we bought it, so I hate Epic. One of the reasons I got out of medical campus.
Right.
Well, get behind, John Halamka has already said FHIR, F-H-I-R, is HTML for healthcare. So I trust John Halamka, his blogs are worth reading. He's in health, I think it's Brigham Women's up in Boston, he's the CIO up there, but real thought leader. But find out all these things, I mean, right now, big data, the Spark project, all these things that are happening in healthcare, all these new devices, you know, these guys, like you said, their biggest threat is, can they break in? Will healthcare allow us to innovate? And I think it will.
It will, but I think those guys, you can see the Apples and the Googles, they're all dying for that stuff, because that's where the money is, and that's where all the big data is, and that's where, especially, you can make it universal, especially in the United States. Okay, well, thank you, Tom, for coming out.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.
I think it's good that people get a sense of it. Okay,
Great question. by the way.
so we'll see each other
It's interesting to see
next
the stack
week.
that you
Stay with
put.
me, if you have additional questions.
It's always a question of, you know, what do you need versus, you know, what do you want to have?
You have plenty to do, huh?
Yeah, oh my God, it's crazy. I'm gonna work
Well,
probably
you-
60 hours the next 4 days.
Well, you can be so kind.
Beyond
Be
that, when you say, okay, I'm gonna go to AWS, right, and I wanna implement this. Management. It's interesting to see it laid out like that, because it makes sense.
Yeah, once you see it, but that's 15 years of doing this, to be able to lay that out and say, this is, because, you know, you learn. Like, okay,
Thank
don't wanna
you.
use Active Directory,
We'll see each other.
well, then you're tied to Active